and alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022 in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Gonsalves, a human being, by stabbing Kaylee Gonsalves, from which she died.
Now, the family of murder victim Kaylee Gonsalves is petitioning the court for a change in a strict gag order. A hearing related to the motion is now set for May 25th, just 1 month before murder suspect Bryan Kohberger's lengthy preliminary hearing is scheduled.
This is State of Idaho versus Bryan C. Kohberger.
Kohberger was arrested in late December of last year for the murders of 4 University of Idaho students found stabbed to death in an off-campus home. In the weeks following the murders, officials made no arrests and kept tight-lipped about the case, only revealing a white Hyundai Elantra was spotted near the crime scene in the early morning hours of the murders.
We are confident that the occupant or occupants of that vehicle have information that's critical to this investigation.
Investigators later linked that vehicle to Kohberger, a PhD student who was studying at nearby Washington State University when the murders took place.
So you're coming from Washington State University? Yeah. And you're going where? Oh, okay.
At the time of his arrest, Kohberger was staying at his parents' house in Pennsylvania. After an extradition hearing in early January, Kohberger was taken back to Idaho and booked in the Latah County Jail. That's where he's been ever since. On January 4th, Latah County Magistrate Judge Megan Marshall issued a specific gag order that would block investigators and attorneys involved in the case from speaking with the press. 2 weeks later, on January 18th, the order was amended to include attorneys representing the family of the victims. It's those family members now pushing back on the order.
I don't know what their motivation is, but their point is well taken, which is, why does this gag order apply to an attorney of a victim who is not directly part of the court proceedings?
Litigator Rich Schoenstein tells Law&Crime Network the motivation behind the motion may not be totally clear, but he does say the gag order as a whole is bizarre.
It's very unusual, and I think it's improper. The victims are not parties to the case. And so when you think about a court imposing rules for the trial, and that's essentially what this is, the court imposing rules for the trial, it imposes those rules on the parties. So in a criminal case, it's on the prosecution, it's on the defense. It can be on witnesses once they testify and are subject to the jurisdiction of the court. But it's very odd to have a gag order like that apply to people who aren't part of the court proceedings, directly part of the court proceedings. And I think it's dangerous territory to sort of go in that direction.
Shannon Gray, the attorney representing Kaylee Gonsalves' family, filed a motion back in February to appeal the gag order.
There are 2 challenges, as I understand it, to the gag order. One is by the media. There are lawyers representing a collective of media outlets challenging the gag order, and they went to the Supreme Court of Idaho, and that court said, no, you can't come to us right away. You have to go back to the lower court. And then we have this separate application by the counsel for one of the victims, and the lower court was waiting to deal with that until it saw how the Supreme Court handled the other challenge. So that's what happened. The Supreme Court last week rejected the media challenge, and then the lower court set this challenge for hearing on May 25.
On April 24th, the Idaho Supreme Court ruled the gag order would remain in effect. More than 30 news organizations, including Law&Crime Network, brought their requests to lift the order. Supreme Court justices said the argument should be taken to the magistrate judge who initially issued that gag order. After that, Gray requested a hearing about the order, which is now set for May 25th.
This is a gag order that the court imposed principally on parties in the case. So the prosecution, the defense, the investigators, not to speak to the media outside the court. And the gag order is written very broadly so that it appears to also apply to victims and their counsel. And that, I think, is the issue that's going to come before the court on May 25th.
Gray argues the gag order should only apply to attorneys, investigators, and their agents, and defendant Bryan Kohberger. Gray believes the family members of the victims should be allowed to speak under their First Amendment rights. But even with a hearing date set for later this month, Schoenstein says an official ruling may not be made right away.
In the first instance, it's the trial level judge reconsidering the order that's been issued. And this happens all the time. A judge issues an order for anything, and the parties or whoever's affected can come in and ask for reconsideration or modification or even to withdraw the order altogether. So I think this hearing is just going to be oral argument of the legal positions. I think you'll hear from counsel for the victim's family that wants this gag order modified so it doesn't apply to them. And you may hear countervailing argument. I don't know if the prosecutors or the defense are going to take a position about the gag order. They certainly will have the right to be heard, but I don't know what they're going to say. And then the judge might decide it right then and there, could modify the order on the spot, or as frequently happens at oral argument, the judge can say, thank you very much. I'm going to consider it, take it under advisement, and I'll be issuing a decision or order in the near term.
With a looming preliminary hearing date set, Schoenstein believes a ruling will be made before June 26th.
That preliminary hearing is going to be an intense subject of media interest. So everybody has to know what the rules of the road are, who can speak to who, when. That has to be decided. So I think the judge is going to have to figure this out before then.
But there could be several different outcomes should the magistrate judge's ruling be appealed.
Now, the trial judge could do a couple of different things. The trial judge could modify the order effective immediately, and then it has to be appealed to be changed. Or the trial judge could modify it, but could issue a stay of the modification pending appeal. Or whoever wants to appeal it could go up to the appellate court and ask the appellate court for an immediate stay pending a determination of appeal on the merits. That happens sometimes. Now, I expect here that there'll be a lot of deference to the trial judge to conduct the trial and set the rules of the courtroom as she sees fit. I think that it would be odd to see the appellate court staying that before considering the legal issues. So I think whatever the trial judge does is going to be the rule in the first instance.
The defense may support the gag order as is, arguing it could affect Kohberger's right to a fair and impartial trial.
I think the defense here has an argument that there's been a lot of speculation and innuendo all over the internet, and it's intense. And the defense's argument is it's going to deprive the defendant of a fair trial to have the lawyer of the victim potentially going around on media outlets spreading the story and trying to portray the defendant as being guilty. That's not what the trial is for. And so from the defendant's point of view, we want to limit the media attention as much as we can pending trial. But of course, then you have the First Amendment on the other side. And, there's a right for people to speak about fascinating cases. There's a right for the media to cover it. There's a right for the victims to speak out. All of that is under the ambit of the First Amendment. So it's a very interesting competition between First Amendment rights and the victim's rights to a fair trial.
Right now, it's unclear whether Bryan Kohberger will appear for that May 25th hearing. Schoenstein says it's well within his rights, but ultimately will be up to Kohberger and his attorneys to decide. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.